There are places in this world that defy explanation, places where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, where the past refuses to stay buried, and where the shadows seem to have a life of their own. Black Hollow is one of those places. A small, forgotten town nestled deep in the woods. It's a place where strange things happen, things that can't be explained. Tonight, I'll share 3 stories from Black Hollow, stories that will make you question what's real and what's waiting in the dark. Let's begin. It was a cold, rainy night when Sarah first saw him. She was driving through the woods near Black Hollow, her headlights cutting through the downpour. The road was empty, and the only sound was the rhythmic swish of her windshield wipers. That's when she saw him, a man standing by the side of the road, his thumb out like he was hitchhiking. Sarah didn't usually pick up strangers, but something about him made her stop. He climbed into the passenger seat, dripping wet, and thanked her for the ride. He didn't say much at first, just gave her directions to a small town about 20 miles away. But as they drove, Sarah noticed something strange. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something from the 1950s, and his skin was pale, almost translucent. When she asked him his name, he just smiled and said, "You can call me Jack." The further they drove, the more uneasy Sarah felt. The rain was coming down harder now, and the road seemed to stretch on forever. She glanced at Jack, and that's when she noticed it. His reflection wasn't in the window. She blinked, thinking it was just the rain, but when she looked again, it was still gone. Her heart started to race, but she kept driving, too afraid to say anything. Finally, they reached the town. It was small, with just a few dim streetlights and empty buildings. Jack pointed to an old house at the end of the street. "That's me," he said. Sarah pulled up to the house, and Jack got out of the car, but before he closed the door, he leaned in and said, "Thanks for the ride. You're a good person. Not many would stop for someone like me." Sarah watched him walk up to the house and disappear inside. As she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When she got home, she looked up the town on her computer. What she found made her blood run cold. The town had been abandoned for decades, and the house Jack went into had burned down in 1957. The only victim was a man named Jack Thompson, a hitchhiker who had died on that very road. Sarah never saw Jack again, but sometimes on rainy nights she thinks about him. And she wonders, was he really a ghost? Or was he something else? But the story of Jack Thompson is just the beginning. Black Hollow has many secrets, and not all of them stay buried. Let me tell you about the old cemetery on the edge of town, a place where the dead don't rest. Tom was a night watchman at the Black Hollow Cemetery. It wasn't a job he enjoyed, but it paid the bills. The cemetery was old, with crumbling headstones and overgrown weeds, and it had a reputation for being haunted. But Tom didn't believe in ghosts. Not until his first night on the job. It started with the whispers. As Tom made his rounds, he heard faint voices coming from the graves. At first he thought it was the wind, but the voices grew louder, more distinct. "Help us," they said. "Set us free." Tom tried to ignore them, but the whispers followed him everywhere he went. Then he saw them. Shadows moving between the headstones, figures kneeling by the graves. They looked like people, but their faces were blurred, like static on an old TV. Tom's flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, the figures were gone, but the whispers remained. The next night, the whispers were louder. "You're one of us now," they said. Tom tried to quit, but his boss wouldn't let him. "You signed a contract," he said. "You can't leave until your shift is over." But Tom's shift never ended. On the third night, he disappeared. The only thing they found was his flashlight, lying next to an open grave. Some say Tom's still there, wandering the cemetery, searching for a way out. Others say he's one of the shadows now, trapped forever in the graveyard shift. But the cemetery isn't the only place in Black Hollow where the dead walk. There's an old house on the edge of town, a house where the walls whisper and the past never stays buried. The house on Hollow Hill was the kind of place kids dared each other to enter. It was old and crumbling, with broken windows and a sagging roof. But it wasn't the house itself that scared people. It was what happened inside. Emily was new to Black Hollow, and she didn't believe in ghost stories. So when her friends dared her to spend the night in the house, she agreed. They gave her a flashlight, a sleeping bag, and a warning: don't go into the basement. But Emily wasn't one to follow rules. The house was cold and damp, and the air smelled like mildew. Emily set up her sleeping bag in the living room, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. As the hours passed, she heard noises, footsteps on the stairs, whispers in the walls. She told herself it was just the wind, but then she heard the voice. "Come downstairs," it said. Emily tried to ignore it, but the voice grew louder, more insistent. Finally, she gave in. She grabbed her flashlight and headed for the basement. The stairs creaked under her weight, and the air grew colder with each step. When she reached the bottom, she saw it, a mirror covered in a dusty sheet. Emily pulled the sheet off the mirror, and that's when she saw them. Dozens of faces staring back at her, their eyes wide with fear. They were the people who had disappeared in Black Hollow over the years, trapped in the mirror, begging for help. Emily tried to run, but the mirror pulled her in. Her friends found her the next morning, standing in front of the mirror, her reflection gone. The house on Hollow Hill still stands, and the mirror is still there. Some say if you look into it, you'll see Emily's face, staring back at you, begging for help. But no one dares to find out. Black Hollow is a place where the past never dies, and the shadows are always watching. These stories are just a glimpse into the darkness that lurks there. But remember, not all stories are meant to be told, and not all places are meant to be explored. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling tales. And tell me in the comments, would you dare to visit Black Hollow? Until next time, stay curious, but be careful where you wander. The shadows are always watching.